Stephen Church family, here are your church announcements. Listen, it's been a tough week as we have dealt with what's becoming known as a global pandemic, COVID-19, aka the coronavirus. Your health and safety is the utmost of importance to us, so we will continue preaching the word from the book of CDC. Please be sure to wash your hands as often as possible with warm soapy water for at least 20 seconds. If soap and water are unavailable, use a hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. Avoid contact with your eyes, face, and mouth, and when greeting other church members, avoid hand-to-hand contact and greet them with an elbow tap. So wash your hands and spread this message. And if you're not feeling well, please stay at home.
Uh-oh. Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's Hump Day.
Woo-hoo!
Today is Hump Day, and yes, we are still here. Nothing can stop us now. So, I was just amazed when I looked at last week's lesson and this week's lesson. These lessons were put together, several weeks, maybe a couple of months ago, but yet they are so great at this time. Last week's lesson, we talked about let go and let God, and that's exactly what we need to be doing in this crisis time. Stop the worrying, stop the all the running around and wishing, and of course I want you to look at television, stay up to date with what's going on, but don't worry. So it may not look like it, but God is in control. He's got this thing. This did not catch him by surprise. He knew it. And last week when we talked about faith, remember we said now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, which means that, yes, we're going to use good sense, because someone said to me, well, God didn't give us the spirit of fear. And I said, no, he didn't. But he also gave us wisdom and knowledge. And we as Christians are and should be responsible and do what our leadership tells us. Pastor Cosby made it so clear Sunday when he said we are not gathering not because we living in fear, but we have a responsibility. And our responsibility is to make sure that you stay safe, but we also bring you the word of God. Remember last week I also said to you, the Bible never defines faith, but gives demonstrations of faith for us to see. And this is our faith in action today, that we are still here live streaming, believing and trusting that God will take care of us. It is faith that keeps the faithful going. You remember we said that. It's the faith that keeps faithful going, no matter the environment or the situation. And we are going to keep on. We will be here for you, and we will be listening for you. It is faith that finds a way to witness for the Lord, no matter the circumstances. Here we are. This is faith finding a way to witness to you. You may not be able to come out, but we can come in to you to witness for the Lord, because we believe. You remember, we talked about that our faith makes us say that God is an omnipotent God that can do anything and everything necessary for his people. And God will take care of us in this trying time. We believe that God is an omniscient God that both can and does know everything. So as I said at the beginning, this did not catch him by surprise. He always knew. And he's an omnipresent God, which means that his presence can be detected and he is in control. Now, let's go to today's lesson. It's entitled, If I Perish, I Perish. Now, we are talking, the series for this month, which is Women's Month, has been Flawless by Faith. And for those of you who are listening, know We will not celebrate Women's Day this coming Sunday as planned, but you will be notified when we will have our women's celebration. But we still in this series, Flawless by Faith. And so our lesson for today is about Esther, and it's entitled, If I Perish, I Perish. So after studying this lesson, students will see that we do not have to let our situation dictate our actions. Whoa, that was good right there. Drop the mic on that one. We do not have to let the situation, and we are in a situation, dictate our action. But by faith, we need to take a stand for God in this trying time. Do what we are called on to do because we want to be good citizens. Our Bible teaches us that. But we also need to stand for what's right and stand for one another. Now, let me point out to you something about the book of Esther, and that's where we're coming from, is Esther. The book of Esther is one of two books named after a woman, the other book being Ruth. It's interesting that two books named after a woman, Esther, who is a Jew, and Ruth, who is a Gentile, a Moabite. Now, and it's interesting that God doesn't play favors. Whoa, I like that. He doesn't play favors. We got women, and one is a Jew, and one is a Gentile. Now, let's go back. The children of Israel were sent into exile in Babylon because of disobedience. Now, when Cyrus made his decree after 70 years of them being in Babylon, all of the people, all of the Jews that was taken in captivity did not return to the promised land. Now that we've got to understand, several million of the people did not return, and it's estimated that only about 60,000 people did return. The book of Esther is a record about those who stayed. Now, let me also mention to you this. The name of God is not mentioned in this book. The name of God is not mentioned anywhere in the book. Prayer is not mentioned in the book. But even though God's name is not mentioned, even though prayer is not mentioned, we can see God's finger directing everything that happens. Look at today. Many places that God's name, Jesus' name, is not to be spoken. In the schools, prayer was taken out of the school. God's name is not to be spoken. Prayer is not spoken. But I come to say to you today, God is in control. How is God directing them? By providence. By providence. And what do we mean by providence? Providence means to provide. If you see that, provide, P-R-O-V-I-D. The first word you see in providence is provide. And in this great little book, we will see, the book of Esther, we will see God providing for his people. And here's the good news. God provided for them then, and God will provide for us today, because God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So, regardless, God is in control. Pastor Cosby said something once that I just dearly love. He made this statement: the devil is losing even when it looks like he is winning, and God is winning when it looks like he is losing. And for us today, some people may feel that God looks like God is losing, but I come to declare to you today, if you get nothing else from this live broadcast, know this: God is in control and he is winning. Now, the book of Esther starts out. There's two prominent women in this book. The first one is Queen Vesti. And Queen Vesti goes from the palace to the pit because Artaxerxes, the king, he was having, you talking about a party. We thought Derby or something, but Derby and all the stuff that we see going on today, this man knew how to throw a party. It lasted for about 6 months. Everybody, yeah, I said it, everybody was invited. And so, and you could drink as much wine and as you wanted. So, you know, folks, some of us get too much. And so when the king had just a little bit too much, he wanted to show off the queen. So he wanted the queen to come and parade around with just her crown on. But Vesti made a stand, and sometimes, a lot of times, we have to make a stand. And she selected principles over the palace. And we have to make a decision sometimes for principles, even at the risk of losing the palace. She picked character over the crown. And that's what we should do. We should have character about ourselves. If we got principles, we ought to have character. And she put pride over the position. She had too much pride to parade around with just a crown. I said just a crown, in front of a bunch of drunken men. I don't care if the husband did say it. And we have to understand that we're living at a time where women were thought of as property. Some of us seem to feel that way today, but women are not property. They are people just like a man is. God, when he selected and decided that he was going to make woman, he took the rib out of Adam's side so that she might be a helpmate. And that's what he said to Adam, that he needed a helpmate. So by Queen Vesti selecting principle over the palace, character over a crown, and pride over her position, guess what? She got booted out. She got booted out as being queen. She went from the palace to the pit. She went into exile because the men that the king listened to said, oh, no, no, no. If she gets away with this, then our wives will start acting like that, and we can't have this. So let's put her in exile, king. And what you can do is you can select another queen from just round up the prettiest virgins, and out of them, whichever one pleases you, you can make her queen. So now Esther is in Babylon. She is the cousin of Mordecai. Mordecai is her cousin. And Esther is a young girl. She was taken into exile, just like Daniel was, at an early age. It's felt that Daniel must have been between 10 and 12 years old. And we have to think that Esther was probably, and her Jewish name is Hadassah. She had to have been somewhere between 12 and maybe 14. 12 or maybe 14. She was a young girl, and now just think, you are taken away from your family. Well, her father and her mother were deceased, and Mordecai, her cousin, was looking out for her. So when it came to be known that the king was going to round up the prettiest virgins, he wanted Esther and hoped that Esther would be one of the ones that was chosen. So let's look at Esther, the two queens in the Bible. Vesti, who has gone from the palace to the pit. We will now see Esther, who will go from the pit to the palace. Whoa, that was good right there. She will go from the pit to the palace because, first of all, the king sends out a proclamation declaring that he would select from a group of virgin women. They had to be beautiful. That whoever pleased him, that they would be made queen. So we look now at Esther. Let's look at Esther. Esther, her character, because we talked about character, and we said Vashti selected character over the crown. But now, first of all, I've already said Esther is unknown because she is a child of captivity. She's a child of captivity. She is a Jewish and a share with her people in their bondage. That's what it meant when we say that she's a child of captivity, that she is a Jew and she is in bondage with her people. Also, she was an orphan. But the good news about the Bible tells us when we find ourselves in situations like this, although my father, I'm reading from Psalms 27:10, although my father and my mother have abandoned me, they died, yet, and you know what yet stands for? Yes, even then. Yet the Lord will take me up. In other words, the Lord will adopt me as his child. Now, so Esther, she is unknown, and she's unlikely to be the choice as a queen because she is little known. She's a Jew. She's got no influence. But the good news is that kind of stuff God does not look at. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 26 through 29. If you don't have this highlight in your Bible, you really need to. Because it says, brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God, you got to watch the but gods in the Bible. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of the world. I don't know about you, but I'm so glad that he did, because I fall into these categories, especially the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. You need to highlight that in your Bible, because brothers and sisters, think of what you were when God called you. Some of us were drunks, alcoholics, were in drugs. Some of us had no education, had no aspirations. There was no indication of anything of worth about us. Not many of us were wise by human standard. Not many were influential. I don't know about you, but I wasn't even influential enough to be selected first on the softball team at school. If you've ever, you know how at school, you got a softball team, and they say, I select you, and they say, well, I select you. Well, guess what? I was the last one to be chosen for the softball team. And what was so bad about it? I could play softball because I was raised in the Carter homes, and there was this play field out there near my house, and we went out there and we played ball every day. But I had some strikes against me. Number one, I wore glasses, so they called me Four Eyes. I was kind of heavy set, so they called me Fatso. And guess what? I was the last to be chosen. Do you know how it feels to stand there and everybody gets selected and you know what you can do? But that was my lot. That was my lot. So I wasn't much of anything, not even for the softball team. But God chose the foolish thing. And that's what I see in myself. The foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. And God chose the lowly things of the world and the despised things. I said I was called four eyes, nappy head, but I was also called fatso. 3 strikes you out of anybody's ball game. But God saw me and selected me. I didn't choose him, he chose me. Said, I want you to teach my word. Woo! Don't get me started on that. Why did he do it? To nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. All right? So we see Esther. We see her character. She's unknown, and she's unlikely to be selected as queen. But God is working here. God is working here. But she pleased him. So Esther was selected as one of the ones to be taken to be in the king's harem. And she was provided with beauty treatments, special foods. She was assigned 7 female assistants who would help her and take care of her needs and get her ready to see the king. Now, it was going to take 1 year. Now listen to me. Woo, this is, you got to get this. It was going to take 1 year to prepare her to go in and see the king. Now, did you hear what I just said? It was going to take 1 year. Here's what it says. He provided her, which means the head eunuch, with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. And before a young woman could go in to see the king, she had to complete 12 months. This is the 2nd chapter of Esther, verse 12. Before a young woman could go in to see the king, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatment prescribed for the women. 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfume and cosmetics. Now, 6 months, 12 months, she had to be prepared to make herself presentable to go in and see the king. I just said something. I hope you all caught that. Our king is not like that. He said, whosoever will, let him come. See, we cannot, and many of us make this mistake. We want to first, want to get myself right before I come into his presence. Well, guess what? You cannot get yourself right. It reminds me of the old childhood nursery rhyme. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. And you know, this goes right in this lesson because this is Hump Day. Had a great fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put him back together again. But here's the point I like about thinking about that. The king's horses and the king's men couldn't put him back together again, but the king can. Whoa, God almighty, that was good. The king can. And so guess what? It does not matter about how long, if we try, we can't get ourselves right to go to see the king. We need to go into his presence. And this is how, but in the story of Esther, she had to be prepared for 12 months to spend one night in the king's presence. But I want to stop and appeal to you that you can go into his presence right now. I can go into the king's presence right now. And in fact, let me tell you, I'll get to that in just a minute. So let's first look at her calling, her preparation for a presentation to the earthly king. This is an earthly king, but there has to be a preparation for her presentation to see the earthly king. 12 months of beauty treatment. Anything she wanted was given to her, and she was to spend one night with the king. Well, the time finally came for Esther to go in and see the king. Now, Mordecai, her cousin, wanted her to do this, and she did it. But God was directing this because the king found favor with Esther. He was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women. And she won the favor and approval of him. So he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Esther. Now, he still doesn't know that Esther is a Jew. So we saw her character, her calling, her crown. She's called as a candidate for a crown. Esther's selection was not by accident, but by providence, because God is still moving. And so now she will get divine direction by the heavenly king. And God intercedes and puts her in favor with the earthly king. He is attracted to Esther, and this Jewish girl becomes the queen of the most powerful Gentile country in the world, because God has a plan. God always got a plan. Remember that. He has a plan for your life and my life. God will get, even with this coronavirus going around us, God will get the glory out of this, because first comes suffering, then comes glory. Don't forget that first comes suffering, then comes glory. Now, Esther is not a long book, so you need to read it, but it's too much in it for me to be able to try to cover in the time allotted for us. So let me give you a quick review of chapter 3. There is Adolf Hitler in the Old Testament by the name of Haman. In chapter 3, we see Haman is made the king's favorite. And Haman is full of himself. When he comes out of the king's palace and go past the gate, everybody bows to him except Mordecai. Mordecai refused to give him the honor he demands. And because of that, Haman vows revenge upon Mordecai and all the Jews. So he gets a malicious suggestion, and he obtains an order from the king to have all the Jews massacred on a certain day. And this order is given out to all of the provinces in this kingdom. Now, once the king has done this, he cannot go back and retract it. Now, also, we find that Haman has is upset with Mordecai because you got to read it, because like I said, I really don't have time to give you all the ins and outs of it, but it's a great reading. You need to stop looking at the soap opera. If you ever want to just get some show enough soap opera, you need to read the Old Testament, read the Bible, because what we will see is that Haman, he hates Mordecai, who is sitting at the king's gate. So Mordecai may have been elevated because he is sitting at the king's gate every day. This is his way of looking out to see how Esther was doing. Well, while he was sitting there one day, he heard two of the servants plotting against the king. He makes it known, and the king has these enemies put away. So it was written in the king's book. So one night the king couldn't sleep, and he got up and he began to read the ledger, and he read about Mordecai. And he thought, well, how did I ever repay him, say thank you to him? So what he did is that he asked Haman, what should I do to show my pleasure to someone who has really defended me, who has looked after me? And Haman, thinking that the king was talking about him because he's full of himself, he decides, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell him, well, king, here's what you need to do. You need to take the man, put him on your horse, have one of your main people to parade him through the streets and cry out, this is what the king will do for anybody, for everybody who finds favor with him. Because he was thinking that he was going to get this, this elevation. And so what the king does is have Mordecai put on his horse and Haman parade him. Now Mordecai's the one that don't even want to bow to him. And now Haman has to lead him through the streets crying out to everybody that this is the king's favorite. So he is really hateful now. So he has that decree sent out. In chapter 4, the decree has sent out to all of the provinces. The Jews learn of the decree, and they begin to rip their clothes and set in sackcloth and ashes to show they are in mourning. Mordecai inquires, and he goes to Esther and wants Esther to prevent it. Esther wonder what is wrong that Mordecai, he's sitting at the king's gate in sackcloth and ashes, and he tells her and asks her if she will go to see the king. Now Esther says, and she knows that she says, sends word back to Mordecai, the king has not called for me for 30 days, and if he has not called for you and you go in, you can be put to death unless he holds out the golden scepter. So Mordecai presses her to go. Here's what Esther does. She calls for a 3-day fast. 3-day fast, she said, have everybody do not eat or drink anything for 3 days. Me and my maids, we would do the same thing. After that, I will go in to see the king. And she says, now look at her faith. This is where faith comes in. She says, I will go in to see the king. And if I perish, I perish. But I'm going to see the king. But the interesting thing, and let me bring it back down to today. Mordecai says to Esther, how do you know that God didn't put you in a position for such a time as this? And we need to see her courage for such a time as this. You have to ask yourself, what time is it? It is a dark time. And we are now, this is a dark time in America, in all the cities. It's a dark time. It's a dangerous time because never in my days have I ever seen the streets so empty. When I came out to come over to the church to do the streaming, no one was out in my block. There was no children out playing. Yes, school is out, but they weren't out playing. There was no cars going up and down the street. No one was out on their porch. It was eerie. I did not pass that many people and cars on the streets. It's a peculiar time. Why? Because it's a dangerous time. We don't know anything about this coronavirus other than it spreads and it can kill, and it preys on certain age. It's a desperate time, and we find ourselves in a desperate situation where people are finding it hard even to find toilet tissue, hand wipes. It's a desperate times. It's a dark time because we don't know how long it will be, how long this will go on. But this is one thing that we know. For such a time as this did not catch God by surprise, because he tells us in his word there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time for this and a time for that. And my sisters and brothers, now seems to be the time. It is a dangerous time. It's a desperate time. It's a dark time. It's a difficult time. Now, I'm telling you, staying in the house is not easy for a person like me. Somebody calls, say, how you doing? I said, I can stay in here just a few more days. I need to get out. But God says, settle down, go in there and start writing your lessons. So he wants us to see he got our attention now. He has tried to get our attention, but we are so into ourselves. We keep looking at the White House, the courthouse, the state house, but we need to look to his house, because because he says, if my people who are called by my name, that's us, would humble themselves, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways and pray, then if you do your part, he will do his part. Look at Esther. The law was against Esther. She could not go without the king sending for her. But whereas the law was against her, the king's heart was for her. And the king's heart is for us. It is a time for salvation for others. And we see Esther going in, and she goes in, and she approaches the throne. And I said at the beginning that, you could go to him anytime, any place, anywhere. But Esther also gives us some directions in how to approach God, because we got to remember God is a holy God. And so she gets ready to go. What she does is, because she's been in sackcloth and ashes, fasting and mourning for 3 days, but now she puts on her royal robes. And my sisters and brothers, we are a child of the King. We can put on our royal robes, our robe of righteousness, and go in to see him. Esther, when you read it, I'm not making this up, chapter 5, she stands in full view of the one who is sitting on the throne. And I come to tell you today that we are in full view of the one who sits on the throne. And just like the king turned around and saw Esther, our king will see us standing there waiting to present our petition to him. Esther is expecting the king's favor. If she didn't expect the king's favor, she would not have gone. Yes, she said, if I perish, I perish, but I'm going to see the king. So she is expecting the king's favor. And I tell you, today I expect the king's favor, that he will hear and answer our prayer. Esther's waiting for the royal scepter to be extended to her. And I believe that God, when he turns and sees, he will say, what can I do for you, my child? Because I'm a child of the king. A father is certainly noticeable to his children, and children believe that their father can do anything. I don't just believe it, but I know that my father, my heavenly father, can do anything but fail. Whoops, wait a minute. I told you that we might do a series next year, because I don't think it'll get in this year. 101 things that God cannot do. I know you're saying he cannot lie. And I'll tell you another, he cannot attend a funeral. But God can do anything he wants. And when the king holds out the scepter to Esther, she's ready to tell him what she wants. And my sisters and brothers, when God comes and asks us, what do you need, my child? We need to be ready to tell him what, and it's not just about us. It's not just about us. It's about praying for others. It's about praying for those who are in the hospital. It's about praying for the healthcare providers. It's about caring for the doctors and the nurses. It's about caring for those who are researching and trying to find an answer. It's about praying for the leadership. It's about praying for the fellowship. It's about praying for our pastors, our people who still need to come out to bring the word to you. It's about praying for one another. I don't know about you, but God has made us see that we need one another. What's that old song? I need you to survive. And if we are to survive, we will learn that we need one another. And then we see Esther listening for the king's voice. And that's what we need to do in this trying time right now. We need to listen for his voice. And then not only she's listening for his voice, but she's relying on his promise. And my sisters and brothers, that's what we need to do today. Rely on his promise. Let me tell you one of the promise that he's given us. I will not leave you, nor will I forsake you. And we need to rely on that promise. And because Esther was bold enough, Esther, another title I started to give this lesson was the bold and the beautiful, because she was bold and she was beautiful. Esther pleads her case to the king. And that's what we need to do, is plead our case to the king. And when she did that, when she made known, go and read it. Because of the times that we're living in. You need to know your enemy. Your enemy is real, and your enemy is roaming around to and fro, up and down, seeking whom he may devour. Some he will scare with this coronavirus. Is that now you see, and if God is all powerful, if God can do, if God knows. But here's what you need to do. Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Now, so I say to you, when she made her plea, the king heard her and she found favor. And this is what the king does, because he had already sent out the post that declares it was a message of death, giving them, the people of Babylon, the power to go in and take whatever they want from the Jews. They could kill them. They could do whatever. It's more like a purge, if you would, please. That's why I say that's another subject that we need to take a look at in the future. Is life imitating art or art imitating life? But the first post was a message of death. But the king could not override that one, so he sends out a second post. And that second post said that the Jews can defend themselves even up to killing their enemy. And thereby Esther saved her people. So, my sisters and brothers, we need to have faith that God will take care of us through these times. It's by faith in God's power. Remember that God can do anything but fail. We told you last week that God can go against his natural law to preserve and to bring his people through. He has promised, I will not forsake you, nor will I leave you. And we need to stand on his promise. But I will say to you, if this coronavirus sweeps through, if I perish, I'll perish. But if I perish, you know what? I'll be like Esther. I'll be going to see the king. Tune in with us again next week. We'll be here again next week. Until then, stay safe and be careful. God bless you.